Thank you. Hey, could you get somebody to get me a coffee? Some coffee? Yeah. Thanks, Tom. That's an awful nice thing to say. Before I'd kind of downplay it, but I thought that is a nice thing to say. That touched my heart. My name is Joe, and I'm a grateful alcoholic. This has been an interesting weekend. I was glad I could be here for Tom's anniversary and Bob's. I got sober when I was 23 years old, and I'll be 60 this year. And hey, thanks, Tom. Beautiful. And as I was listening to Bob last night with 60 years of sobriety, I thought, he got sober 4 months before I was born. And I'll tell you what, that just doesn't happen too often. You know, I'm 35 years sober, and as time goes by, all of a sudden you start to realize, hey, I'm the oldest person in the room. And when somebody comes by like that, you go, wow, that gives me hope, because he seemed to be fairly happy with himself, didn't he? I mean, he was, and he had his right mind, too. I like that. Usually people that old, they don't remember yesterday. They don't remember a whole lot. So, hey, look, this is really, I was looking forward to coming here because, you know, I was here 45 years ago. I was 15 years old, and I was with a friend of mine and his brother-in-law. And his brother-in-law was an ex-Vietnam vet. He was a medic in Nam, and he had lost the lower part of his leg. And he was just a nice guy. But we came here camping, and we were drinking Southern Comfort. I was 15, and he said, here, try these Darvons. If you mix Darvons with Southern Comfort, man, you get there fast. And he let us drive his Dodge Swinger. It was like a Dodge Dart, but it was a sports car back then. He said, as long as you guys don't burn rubber in the park, you can drive it all over the place. So the last time I was here, I was drunk on Southern Comfort, driving illegally, and I didn't know I was going to be back 45 years later. It looks a whole lot different right now. I was thinking about what to talk about this morning because I can't pull off identical talks. I spoke at the Rule 62 conference last week, and I had such a great time. And it was an interesting meeting because a lot of people that were there knew my mother. They knew me when I was new in AA. They knew my brother. And there were people there that called me their sponsor. And it was just, it's rare to have all those people in one room at the same time. So I was in a different space at that time, but we'll see what comes out today. My whole family's alcoholic. I just gave my mother her 43rd year AA birthday coin out in the rest home. She's 85 years old. And her birthday was in July the 9th, and then her AA birthday was June the 13th. She got sober in 1971, and she's rather feeble. She's 85 years old, and I went out there to give her her coin, and I says, I've got good news and I've got bad news. And she said, what's that? I said, the good news is you're still alive to get this coin. She said, what's the bad news? I said, I heard that 44th year is a real bitch. She looked at me like, you're never going to change, are you? I go, no, I'm not going to. My mother and I have a great relationship today, but that wasn't always the case, even for many years in sobriety, sad to say. Maybe I'll talk about that. Hell, I don't know. But my mother's sober in AA, 43 years. My brother got sober in 1984, and my sobriety date's October 5th, 1978. And my father never found sobriety, so we're batting 750. And the only thing I'm going to say about my mother and father is when I think of them, I think of people who struggled terribly. They could not overcome the obsession to drink. My mother tried pulling off being a housewife, a homemaker, and a mother, and just couldn't pull it off. She couldn't overcome the obsession. You know, I remember growing up as a kid. It's fun growing up with people that can't overcome the obsession sometimes. I remember one time hearing glass breaking down in the basement. I said, Mom, you all right? What are you doing? She said, I'm smashing up these Carling Black Label beer bottles and I'm rolling them up in a carpet to put out for the garbage. I said, why are you doing that? She said, so the garbage men won't hear the bottles clink. I don't want anybody to know I'm drinking. I went, okay, Mom, let me know if you need any help. I mean, she would hide a quart of beer in the vegetable bin under the sink and one in the refrigerator. And as a kid, I'd go, Mom, why do you keep this quart down under the sink and one in the refrigerator? She goes, I like one hot, I like one cold. I caught her hiding her booze, so it was fun growing up. My father, he tried the same thing. He tried pulling off being a father and a husband and could never really overcome the obsession. And my heart goes out to both of them. I know what it's like to try to raise a family sober and to try to overcome an obsession that no human power can take care of is it's like having a tiger by the tail. But for a long time, I didn't see it that way. I saw it as they're doing it to me. And today I saw it, they weren't doing it to anybody. They would have been that way had you been their kid. They were powerless. I started to drink and get high when I was 13 years old. Matter of fact, I spoke in an A meeting last month at a church next to the high school that I went to school at as a kid. And right across the street from the high school was the girl's house that I went to the party at, where I drank Bali High and smoked Vietnamese pot for the first time at 13 years old. Her brother was in Vietnam. He's sending pillowcases of pot home once a month. And that's before they I know this sense. I've never tried this Sensimillion stuff, but those Vietnamese had it going on. I can tell you, they knew what they were doing. And I went back to give a lead there, and I thought, wow, this is really weird. 47 years ago, I'm starting my journey across the street, and I'm back at an AA meeting. Now, 45 years later, I'm back here, and I'm at an AA meeting. And life is funny. It kind of takes you full circle. But what I didn't know was, as a potential alcoholic, is that once I started to drink, I got separated from who Joe is. We're all designed to be who we are by divine providence, I guess. I was designed to be Joe. And I think everybody's got this inner guidance system inside of them. And what happens to alcoholics, it separates them from that inner guidance system. I have a father-in-law. He drinks 4 or 5 beers, never gets separated. Drink 4 or 5 beers, go to sleep, watch a football game, get up. He's still Oscar. Me, I start drinking 4 or 5 beers, it might end up with 20, and I wake up and the world has screwed me. I don't know why it's like that, but that's the difference between him and me. And I got separated. It was a wonderful thing. I went to this party in 1967 because this girl who was a senior at the high school invited me to a party. Now, I'm 13 years old. You remember when you were 13 and a senior? I mean, they were grown up. They want me at their party. I mean, I was flattered. And I said, yeah, I'll go. And I went, and that's where I started to drink Bali High wine for the first time and smoke pot. That's what the kids were doing in the 60s. And I don't bring marijuana up to upset Alcoholics Anonymous. It was 1967. I was 13 years old. I wasn't going, this will piss them off in AA in 2014. I didn't know I was coming. Did you know you were coming? It's just part of my story. It's not what makes me alcoholic. I thought it made me thirsty. My mouth got real dry. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. And they give me this big bottle of Bali High wine. And at 13, the bottle looked huge. And I'm standing there, and it tastes so good. It was like Tahitian treat. I just couldn't stop puckering. And that's like high C, fruit punch, just damn. And before you know it, I drank the whole bottle. And they're all looking at me. They said, you were supposed to pass that around. I said, well, I didn't know. Nobody told me. I mean, I'm 13 years old. I don't know anything about party etiquette. You pass that stuff around. And that night changed me in a way that I was never aware of. And it changed me, but it was a slight change. It was just a little shift. It was this much of a shift that changed my life. I started to learn how to golf late 40s, early 50s, and I learned right away, when you're on that tee box, if you're not lined up straight ahead, if you're off that much, 250 yards, you're down in the weeds. And what happened that day is I went, and I didn't even know it. I felt so good. I didn't feel a shift. I felt warm all over, man. I felt like I was 18 years old. Somebody say, you feel a shift? No, I didn't feel nothing. I feel great. But I started that separation away from who Joe is. So it was an amazing thing. And I ended up coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. I went through the Navy. I was running away from home, just typical erratic stuff that alcoholics do. My mother kicked me and my brother out, and I ended up on Skid Row on 15th and Scott in Covington, and I was the only guy in the building under 65. We're all sharing the same bathroom. They're chewing Red Man Chew and drinking Echo Springs whiskey. And I'm the new kid. I'm 21, just turned 22. And I just looked at it like I'm in between jobs. Really, powerless over alcohol, life unmanageable never looked like alcohol to me. It always looked like, I need another woman, a relationship. I need a car. I need more money. I need a job. I need something, but it never looked like alcohol. It's so deceptive. It didn't look like that at all. So if you would have asked me on Skid Row, why are you here? I said, well, I'm in between jobs right now. You know, it's the 70s. People were closing things down, and I don't know. Maybe it's because other people get the breaks, and they have family, get them good jobs and stuff. I don't have any family. All my family are in cell block 6 and building A and mental institutions and jails. That's why I'm here. And I came to AA for the first time on April the 10th, 1977. I was 22 years old. My hair was out to here. I had one of those afros where you turn your hair and your hair would catch up to it. And I had bib overalls on with nothing underneath. No shirt, no underwear, no socks, and an old pair of worn-out Earth shoes. And I'm in my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the person who introduced me to AA was my mother. My mother had a restraining order on me and my brother. We weren't allowed within a few hundred feet of her house, or we were going to jail. That's how it got to that point with my mother. And my mother's a sober member of AA, and we're raising hell on a dead-end street and coming home drunk and tearing her house up. She had to kick us out. We were crazy. But she was the one who introduced me to AA. And I'm on my very first AA meeting, and Don M., he was at the meeting last Friday. He gave a lead. Now, I didn't know what AA was, and most of the people who were there are my age now. You know, they were old. God damn, they were old. You know, I'm 22. Anybody over 30 is old. These people were 40 and 50 and 60. Jesus. And I look around, everybody else has shirt and underwear and shoes and socks, and I'm sitting there, and this guy gets up and he gives a lead. And Don had done 5 years in Eddyville Penitentiary in Kentucky. Now, his nose was off to the side because someone had hit him in the face with a tire iron. And he was so mad, had such a resentment, he went and got that guy and tied him to the railroad track and waited for the train. And I'm thought, wow, this AA stuff is wild. That's my first meeting of AA. Oh, these AA people are bizarre. Now, I have no shirt, no underwear, but they're bizarre. You know, so I came to AA the first time, and I didn't stay sober. I went in and out of AA many times. I went through Batesville Hospital, met Butch, Nurse Blue, all of them. Week out of there, I'm drunk like I'd never been to AA. And didn't know that my problem was lack of power. The problem was lack of power. Didn't know, had no clue. I'm blaming the world, and I have no power. I went in and out of AA. I got sober on October 5th, 1978, and that started my journey to where I'm at today. And you know, as I was sitting there, I was looking out at everybody, and I thought, you know, I feel as comfortable here as I do in my living room by myself. That's a wonderful feeling. There was a day where I was so uncomfortable being me, I could never have tolerated sitting there and having everybody looking this way. I couldn't do it. I was just so sensitive about everything. I wanted to read something out of the big book here, and this isn't a vision for you. It's a short paragraph. This is time dated. This applies to women too, okay? It says, it may seem incredible that these men are to become happy, respected, and useful once more. How can they rise out of such misery, bad repute, and hopelessness? The practical answer is that since these things have happened among us, they can happen with you. Should you wish them above all else and be willing to make use of our experience, we are sure they will come. The age of miracles is still with us. Our own recovery proves that. And that is so true. What I didn't know when I came here and I was looking at you people was I looked at a power. Now, if you would have come at me and said, brother, you need God, I'd have said, you can't see this on tape, brother, you need this. And I would have walked away. Now, but this is the tricky thing about AA is God comes to me in the form of, you think you can't not drink for 24 hours? I go, well, yeah, I guess I can do that. Think you can come to the meeting tonight? Well, yeah, I can do that. Kind of eased me into a higher power. I thought this whole thing was to keep me from drinking, and it was, but eventually it put me in contact with this power greater than myself that was going to change me. And I didn't know that. Lack of power was our problem. Lack of power. You know, I'm going to read something else, and I won't read any more out of it. This is why I'm here, really. I'm here, one, because I was asked to be, and two, it's because I need you. So I'm looking at myself. I'm looking at God. I'm looking at God through you. I didn't know that's what I was looking at when I was new. It says, an illness of this sort, and we have come to believe in an illness, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him, and no one is hurt or angry. But not so with the alcoholic illness, for with it there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. That's why I'm here. I don't ever want to go back to that. I don't ever want to go back to that isolation. And then it goes on to tell me lack of power was my problem. Lack of power, they call it pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. That's a really neat word for you're out of gas. You have no power. No matter what you want to do is not going to work out. Lack of power was our dilemma. Even in the inventory it says, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Well, what is the spiritual malady? It's lack of power. I'm out of power. You know, when I take that inventory, that's my pissed list. I am out of power. I know that's how my life is without power. But I don't know that at the time. I'm just too busy blaming the world and everybody in it. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And this self-judgment from alcoholism. You know, I had an offer as a young man to go to college for free. I was an Eagle Scout at 14 years old, and I just turned 15, and President Langston of the University of Cincinnati, he was my sponsor. The kids that made Eagle Scout that year, they had sponsors, President of GE, President of Procter & Gamble. Mine was the president of the University of Cincinnati, and he called me in his office. He said, you ever think about going to college? You know, and I'm just, that nobody had ever asked me that before. And I didn't really know what to say. And he said, well, whatever your decision is, if you keep getting good grades in school, here's my card, and here's my number. You call me when you turn 17, and we'll make sure you go to college if you want to go. In other words, he was going to pay my college education. And the day that the guy gave us the Eagle Scout Awards, he was General Westmoreland, Time Magazine's Man of the Year, the guy, the general in charge of Vietnam. We were all talking after the ceremony, and I'm talking with him. He said, you ever think about being an officer? Well, no. I mean, I'm 14 years old. What the hell do you think about when you're 14 years old? And he says, well, here's my card. I wish I would have kept them. Here's my number. He said, you call me, and we'll make sure that we talk to somebody. If you want to do that, we'll help you do that. Here were two influential people in my life at 14 years old offering me a path that really went somewhere. And here I am, 23 years old, in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have no money. I have no job. I have no car. I have no underwear. And I'm sitting there judging myself for poor decisions that I made. Is that a shame? I thought I made those decisions. No power. I talked to a woman the other day, and you could see she was distraught. She was 5 years sober, and she said, I gave up my kids because I loved drinking more than I did my kids. And I pulled her aside after the meeting. I says, is your mind open to a new idea? She said, yeah. I said, you see that first step up there? It says powerless over alcohol and life unmanageable. Does that imply any kind of choice? She goes, no, why? I said, the insanity in that second step, does that imply that we have any soundness of mind when it comes to alcohol, any choice? She goes, no. I says, I like to look at it like this, that you were powerless to hold on to your children. You had no power. Did you ever look at it like that? And she just started to cry, and she said, no, I never looked at it like that. I thought I chose to drink. That's part of that self-judgment, me thinking I'm doing this to myself. I went through the steps early at 30 days sober because I just thought it was a bunch of crap. There's sentences on paper. I need underwear. I need a job. I need sentences. Who needs sentences? There's no value in sentences. But I did it. I went through the steps at 30 days sober, and I tapped into this power greater than myself. And I would have these great conversations after the meeting with my sponsor on stuff, and he'd say, Joe, the things we talk about are not going to be made clear by things that you and I talk about. They're going to be made clear by other alcoholics that you work with. And I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. You should have all the answers. You're my sponsor. That's what I thought. And I was a year sober, and I'd been working with other alcoholics. And there was a place in Cincinnati called the Mount Airy Men's Shelter. And this really changed things for me. It was phenomenal. And this was a place out in Mount Airy Forest where these guys stay until they can get into a halfway house. And this gentleman kept walking up to me after the meeting for 6 weeks in a row. I used to be an executive with Procter & Gamble for 20 years. I used to have a $500,000 home in Indian Hill, and that was in '79, so that's a few mil today. And I've lost the love and affection of my wife and 3 daughters, and I'm here in the shelter with the fellows here. And I thought, that is really, I didn't say it, but I said, that is one hell of a story. You've had a lot of time to make that up. And after about 6 weeks, I pulled Susan, the social worker, aside. I said, what is it with this guy? He tells me this wild story about all that, and she says, it's true. And I get chills when I said it's true because I got into my car, and I was living in a sleeping room on the other side of the river. I'd been living in a furnished sleeping room for $18 a week, still the only guy under 65, over in Norwood, and I'm on my way home in the car, and I started crying. I just couldn't stop crying. I said, Jesus Christ, I've got what he's got. There's no way you could have convinced me at that time that that man got up one day and said, you know, I think I'm going to drink this Jack Daniels so I can lose the job that I worked for as an executive for 20 years at Procter & Gamble and my home in one of the richest neighborhoods in the country and the love and affection of my wife and 3 daughters so I can go hang out at the shelter with the fellows. Yeah, I think I'll do that. It was never his choice. And when I saw that, the thing that got me were all the conversations that went through my mind with my sponsor about the things I had done before I got on Skid Row and the things I did on Skid Row and the rotten crap and the stealing and bizarre behavior. Oh my God, I never chose to do that. Wow. And it kind of lifted the self-judgment off my back. It lifted it a little bit more. You know, this thing about power is so important. And we hear a lot of advice in AA that sounds good, and it kind of skirts around AA, but it's really not AA. You know, this thing about having cancer and everybody can you imagine a doctor in a cancer ward going up to a patient, writing a prescription, and you give the prescription, and the patient goes, just do the next right thing. What? How's that going to help me with my cancer? Oh, well, here, we'll try this one. There's only one thing you have to change, and that's everything? How the hell is that going to get rid of my cancer, Doc? I can't swing with that. Oh, wow. Oh, well, I'll try this one. Just grow up? How in the hell is that going to help my cancer? And you and I know it doesn't. And it doesn't help alcoholism either. We're dealing with lack of power, not because I made too many wrong choices, not because I was a bad person, not because I'm immature. Because I find it amazing how people look at us. When we're drunk, they go, he's a bum. He is so irresponsible. He can't even go to work and take care of his own family. Or she's a tramp. Look at that. Her kids are all over the place. She can't take care of her home. What the hell's wrong with her? But those same people who are alcoholics find a power greater than themselves, and you know what people say? They seem to be more responsible now. They're going to work, and they seem to be doing the right thing now. That's the way it looks. But to us, we know it's lack of power. And this whole thing's about getting in touch with that power that's going to change me. I had a spiritual experience. I went through the steps at 30 days sober when I came back because I didn't think it was going to work. I thought it was all a bunch of hooey. 12 steps on the wall. And if you've been in and out AA 20, 30 times like I was, it's like sticking in the first grade. Yeah, I know one-on-ones too. I know the AB. I know the promises. I know the fifth chapter. It doesn't work. If it did, I wouldn't be back for the 30th time. But something happened. Something allowed me to thoroughly follow the path the best I knew how. Really. And that's all AA ever asked, is to thoroughly follow the path the best you know how. And it doesn't require you to know anything or understand anything, just a willingness to follow, a willingness to take the steps. Here are the steps we took. Not read about, understand, discussed, looked up in a dictionary. We took them. Yeah, it wouldn't do no good to study Advil. We're going to read the directions. We're going to get together with a group tonight, and we're going to study, take 2 every 4 hours. We're going to find out where it came from. We're going to know the history of where 2 every 4 hours come from. And you ask somebody, well, did you take the Advil? No, but we really understand the directions. And my goddamn head's still killing me. I don't know what that's about. I took them, and I didn't understand really what I was doing. I just did it out of spite. I thought, you really need me to stay sober like you say you do. Listen to this. And I started writing crap down about my inventory. You know, when I wrote all that stuff down, and I got to the sex part, and I go, he'll like this. He's probably never heard this. And I write that down. Because the problem with the alcoholic is their ego's so big, they think they're not like everybody else. They think they're either better than everybody else or worse than everybody else. And both of them are lies. They're no different than anybody else in the room, but they think they are. And I thought I was different. I went and read that inventory, and I got to the sex part, and I went, I did it with a buffalo, Mike. He's sitting there just relaxed, smoking a cigarette. Where were you at fault? I said, I lied to the buffalo. He said, what was the lie? I love you. That was my problem with most of my sex life. I lied to get it. I didn't know you could tell the truth. I didn't learn that till you got sober. You can tell the truth and have sex? Oh my God. I'm on to something. And I used to think I was so bizarre. I've listened to a few hundred fifth steps since I've been sober, and I've heard people's sex inventories, and I've heard stuff where I thought, if I ever drink again, I'm going to try that. That is some creative stuff there. I thought, why didn't I think of that? That's good. That's good. So I went through these steps, and I went home, and I'm 30 days sober, and I'm kind of agnostic. That's like the netherworld. And I went back, and I read this book, and I'm supposed to reflect on what I did for an hour, and my mind's going, whoa, I can't wait an hour. And I look at the wall, and I said, well, there's supposed to be some kind of God. I'm supposed to ask you for help right now. That's what this says. And that was a feeble prayer. And I started to make amends, and things just skyrocketed. They just took off. What I didn't know was I'd come in contact with that power greater than myself that was going to open up a whole new world to me. That it was going to get Joe out of the way most of the time so I could navigate the world without being in collision with everybody I came in contact with. I was a couple weeks sober, and this guy asked me if I needed a job. I said, yeah. You know, when you're hungry and you have no underwear, you just go to work. It doesn't matter what it is. You got to go to work. And I said, what is it? He said, a helper in a boiler room down on Lynn and Liberty in the projects. And I thought, oh, man, I was in the bottom of a ship doing that boiler thing when I was in the Navy. Okay. And I made a decision. Now, I know what this third step says now, but in my mind at that time, I said, well, according to this third step, if I do this stuff, you're going to take care of me. I got that. So, but I have to be willing to do anything. I'm willing to do anything. You take care of me, I'm willing to do anything. So I'm down there in the projects, and they give me these pipe wrenches, and they pop the sewer lid off the ground there, and there's a ladder that goes down 20 feet to a steam line, and there's an old steam trap down there that needs to come out. They said, you're the new guy, go on down there. And hey, don't worry about that rat, he's been dead 3 days, he won't bother you. And the stench and the heat coming up out of there, and I thought, damn it, I said I would do anything. Oh, okay. So I grabbed those pipe wrenches and I went, then I went down that ladder and I got that steam trap and I came back up and threw that thing up on the street, and they're laughing so hard. They said, you're all right, kid, we didn't think you'd do it. Now, this is the power that I tapped into. 18 months later, I have a log sheet in my hand with my name on it that says I am responsible for a $40 million power plant that was brand new, and it's probably worth a couple $100 million today. That name on there says I am responsible for that equipment because if things go wrong, a lot of people get hurt or die. If I don't do my job, hundreds of thousands of dollars of production gets lost. How do you go from, I'll do it, to there? There is no path, there is no course, but it's all about the power. You know, in the spiritual world, a lot of times 1 and 1 is 3. Logic says, no, it's not, but there it is. I was the only guy hired where I'm working now for 34 years that did not have the experience necessary for the job. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for qualified. I'm looking at an ophthalmologist right here. I want the guy operating on my eyes to be number 1 in his class, all right? I'm just saying this has been my path. And I was sober about 1.5 years when I got that job. And the first job was in an all-black housing project. Now, there's nothing wrong with an all-black housing project, but you can see I'm all white. That could cause a conflict. The only white guy within a 20-mile block in the project. And I never had a problem there. But at 2 months sober, I knew I was different. I was going through these buildings. My job at that time, I was on the midnight shift, and it's 2 in the morning, and I'm walking through these long buildings, government housing, no lights. The people who live there stole the lights, and garbage compactors, and rats and roaches, and well, it's kind of like the way I was when I was drunk, but I'm getting paid now, you know. And I'm going through there, and I come up out of this building, and it's the first week of December, and it's snowing real light. There's not a wind at all. And I thought, I feel good. Matter of fact, I feel great. Oh, I didn't make this happen. Oh, that's what they talk about. We suddenly realize that, oh, I get it now because I experienced it. I became very, very aware that I had become happy, whole, and useful in the middle of the ghetto. That surrounding was not important at all. That it was in here, and it was in here. And I realized there's a lot of loose ends in my life that haven't been taken care of. I still owe people money. I don't know what my position in society is going to be. I haven't established my education. But I feel great. And that's when I realized that sobriety is having peace of mind with unresolved problems. That I don't have peace of mind after I solve all these problems, that I can have peace of mind in the meantime. And I felt so good. It's like, oh, my sponsor's got to hear about this. He probably knows nothing about this at all. I'm going to have to talk to him about this. And I'm here to tell you, well over 35 years later, that I have learned and relearned that same lesson over and over and over and over. That the answer is in the power. It's not in the answer. Society says you got to know this, 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 this. Here we go, well, have you prayed about it? Have you worked with another alcoholic? Maybe you need to take inventory. Have you gone over this jail meeting lately? because that is the thing that puts me in contact with this power. That's why I'm here. I want to stay in contact with that power so I can be here. Because this is just my opinion. And if it goes against what your sponsor says, go by what your sponsor says. But I'm not going to change my story because of what your sponsor says. It's mine. I believe the big problem with alcoholics is they're stuck in the wrong time zone. You know, you've saw it yourself. You've seen it yourself. I walked up to a meeting one day and there's guys sobbing outside the meeting. He said, I said, what's wrong? He goes, my father died. I said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. When did he die? He went, 10 years ago. I thought, wow, he can't be here, can he? He's stuck 10 years ago. And then I go into a meeting and this woman, she's beside herself. And you could tell. I said, what's wrong, honey? She said, I'm trying to figure out how to pay for my daughter's college. I mean, it just costs so much. And I said, yeah, that's a daunting task, really. That's a huge amount of money. How old is she? She said, 4. You can see that the anxiety and the stress is they can't be here. And what I experienced in that ghetto is here. Eckhart Tolle talks about the power now. We talk about being here. We call it the sunlight of the Spirit. We call it the world of the Spirit, the realm of the Spirit, the fellowship of the Spirit. I defy you to come up with any kind of problem that you have right now, this very second. Go ahead, I'll wait. You laugh because you know you don't. There is no problem right now. There is no problem right now. It's only when my mind goes, yeah, but you're almost 60, and what about retirement? Or you're going to have enough for medical? What about taking care of your wife? Oh, anxiety. Why? Because I have left here. I have left peace of mind to go worry about something that's imaginary. I'm gone. Where is he? I don't know. He's not here. He looks like he's not here. And I see new people come into AA and they go through the steps just like I did. And they're under all this stress. And all of a sudden they're laughing in the back. They're drinking coffee. They're smacking somebody on the back. I go, oh, they're here. They're here. I want to go, oh, we're so glad you're here, you know, because this is where life's happening. It's not happening anyplace else. Nowhere. And that's why I like talking, because talking puts me here more than almost anything I know. Because I can't be doing this tomorrow, and I can't be doing this yesterday. I can only be doing it right here. So that I guess that's why it makes me feel so good. I was sober a year, and my wife and I, which was my girlfriend at the time, we shacked up together. I went to my sponsor. I said, that's not a major decision, is it? He goes, no, getting married is a major decision. Live with whoever the hell you want to. Just keep going to AA. I go, okay. And, it was great. Steady loving, 50% on the rent. Oh, my God, it was wonderful. And at my 1-year anniversary, I said, I'm going to treat myself to something good. I'm not going to set myself up for disappointment waiting for somebody to celebrate my AA birthday. I should be celebrating my own sobriety. So I had a little 79 Honda Civic, little 4-speed AM, no air conditioning, but it was mine, and it was new. And we rode up to Toronto, and we went up in the CN Tower and went all over Toronto and came back through Niagara Falls. And 26 years later, 26 years later in 2005, we went to Toronto for the World Convention. I'd never been to a World Convention. And you know what? We went back up in that CN Tower. And we're standing there looking around, and I said, you remember the last time we were here? She said, yeah. I said, we weren't even planning on getting married. Do you know what's happened to us in the last 26 years? I know what it is. We tapped into a power greater than ourselves that had created one hell of a life. We bought a home, we raised a family, we've traveled all over the place. We had a son who was born handicapped, and we were given the ability to raise him. We had a brother that did 20 years in prison, visited him every month for 20 years. If you would have told me these things were going to happen, I would see no value in them. But because they did happen, we realized that every problem we ever had in those 26 years were solved. There was not one problem left unresolved, not one. And I think that's the reason why we went to the Toronto convention, was to go back up in that CN Tower to see what this power had done for us. My goodness, I'm way through it. We might be out of here early for lunch. There's this, I always thought that being useful meant I'm going to get a stationary engineer's license. By the way, those stacks out there, I can run that plant. I have a license for the state of Ohio. You let me study that system for a month or two, I can run that plant. That's pretty cool. But I thought that was being useful, and it is in a way. It's providing a service for people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The type of usefulness that I found out that A was talking about for this alcoholic was usefulness that I was totally unaware of. There's this woman at work, she's an electrician, and her name is Joni. And she became an electrician at a time where they didn't like women in skilled trades because that was a man's job. And she had to be pretty thick-skinned to put up with those guys. They tried to run her out, couldn't do it. But because of that, that was her demeanor at work. And this was 22 years ago. And she had made a negative comment about my wife and kids. And I thought, well, that's weird. You don't even know my wife and kids. I mean, it was pretty negative crap. I didn't like it. So I thought, well, this woman's got some crossed energy, and I'm just not going to go around her. I don't like anybody saying negative things about my wife and kids. Now, I didn't resent her, but I just didn't like her. That's the neat thing about being sober. You can dislike someone without gritting your teeth. So for the next 20 years, those guys at work knew how I felt about her, and she'd walk by and they'd start talking. I'd just keep walking. I don't associate with people that say things like that about my family. Well, 2 years ago, I heard she had breast cancer, and she had been off with chemo and radiation. She had 4-stage breast cancer. And I was leaving work, and she was coming in, and something inside of me said, go up and shake her hand and tell her it's good to see her. So that's what I did. I said, it's so good to see you, Joni. I hope you're doing well. And that was it. The next day, I come into work, and a couple of my coworkers are standing over here, and she's getting ready to leave, and she comes up to me and starts talking to me like we had been friends for the last 20 years. And she started telling me about all her chemotherapy and her radiation treatments and what it was like and all that stuff. Now, these guys over there know how I feel about this person. And they're looking at me like, I can't believe he's talking to her. He hasn't talked to her in 20 years. I wonder what he's doing. And as she was talking to me, when she was done talking, I said, what's your prognosis? She said, they can't get rid of it. And I put my arms around this woman, a rather rough-looking woman, and I put my cheek against her cheek, and I held it there for about 15, 20 seconds. I said, you know everything's going to be okay, don't you? She goes, yeah, I know. And when I backed off, I guess I had a tear in my eye. She says, why are you crying? I have the cancer. And I said, yeah, I know. And I walked away, and I'm thinking to myself, that's really out of character for you. And this little voice on the inside of me said, no, Joe, that is your character. And I thought, oh, well, I would never in a million years would have known that I had this well of compassion in me to give another human being that would overlook any past transgressions to provide that human being what they need at that time. That's a form of usefulness that was kind of foreign to me, but I watched myself do it, and I thought, I'm being used here. I could feel that I was being used by this power. And it's really, really an amazing thing. And that kind of usefulness is interesting. I'll tell you another thing. You know how when we're new and we're trying to learn how to practice these principles in all our affairs, it's kind of like learning how to drive a stick shift. You remember how you drive a stick shift and you're grinding gears and your car's jumping and oh, watch that car. He's like, oh man, too much information. Can we drive an automatic? I mean, come on. And then about a month later, you're smoking a cigarette, you're shifting, you're changing the channel, you're talking to people like it's nothing. It's become intuitive, if you will. And I'm here to say, if you're new in the first year of sobriety, that's been my experience. Well, how do you practice this with your mother? Well, how do you do this with this coworker? How do you do this A thing with them? And all of a sudden, before you know it, I'm giving somebody comfort. I'm doing things that I myself am unaware of. I have a barber that I've been going to for 33 years. And I'll tell you what, if you sit in somebody's chair for 33 years, you get to know each other. And there aren't many people that I know that long. Gary knows I'm in AA. And I went in there one day and to get a haircut, and he had just hired this guy that did 10 years in London prison. He was a barber there. He said, well, we had an empty seat, and the guy said he learned to cut hair in a penitentiary, been in there 10 years. We thought he would give him a shot. Oh, well, that's pretty cool. And when I was done getting the haircut, I'm paying him, and I leaned over and I said, Gary, I said, any man that gives another man a second chance in life is a good man. I said, you're a good man, Gary. And then I just paid it, and I walked away. 2 days later, the phone is ringing off the hook. My wife says, Gary's been trying to get a hold of you. I said, Gary who? She said, Gary Renner, your barber. I went, oh, Christ, that guy cut everybody up in the barber shop. God damn. You know, my mind automatically goes to the positive. So I called him. My barber never called me in 33 years. I said, what's going on, Gary? He said, you know when you were in here the other day and we were talking about hiring that guy that did time? And I said, yeah. He said, I just saw myself as a barber that had a chair to fill. I had a business to run. He said, but when you told me that a man who will give another man a second chance is a good man, I never saw myself like that before. And he said, I have not been able to sleep for 2 days. He said, why? He said, you helped me see a part of myself I never knew that was there. He said, thanks. And I said, well, that's pretty wild, Gary. I just thought we were friends and you were my barber. He said, yeah, that's true. He said, but I've always admired and respected you. I said, you have? It was my barber. And he says, I've never met anybody like you. He said, I've never met anybody that's climbed Mount Kilimanjaro once. You've done it 3 times. He said, I don't know if anybody has a pilot's license. You have a pilot's license. He said, you're traveling the world. He said, I've never met anybody that paddled down the Peruvian Amazon. You have. I said, well, I've been to SeaWorld. I thought I'd try something different. And he says, I know people in AA who think highly of you. I said, you do? He said, I know people in Al-Anon who know you. I know people where you work who know you, and they think highly of you too. I said, I had no clue. He said, because I saw you that way, you had a profound effect on me. And I said, well, see, Gary, you are a good man. And I hung up. And I went into the shower, and I cried like a little girl, just snot slinging, crying, for the joy, for the fact that I had helped somebody anonymously, and I never knew I did it. I didn't know that I was being useful. My God pimped me out. I didn't know that and I thought to myself, wow, he helped me see a side of me in that phone call that I didn't know I was doing that for other people. I was just being Joe. And he said, I saw you with your kids in here when they were growing up. I know them. I know your wife. And I thought to myself, oh my God, he's telling me how I've tried to practice these principles and all my, oh wow, I never would have guessed it would have come out like this. Unbelievable. And I think it's great. You know, anonymity is the art of giving without being found out. But when you give and you help somebody and you don't know it, that's spiritual sweetness. I love spiritual sweetness. I like helping people when I don't know I'm helping them. That's fantastic. Being the spiritual giant I am, I know none of you here have ever experienced this, so I'm going to share it with you. It's probably something new. A couple months ago, I was worried about what somebody was thinking of me. God, it just made me so mad. Because I knew what I had done. I had willingly give up my happiness to go worry about what they think. Like I knew what they think. It was this gossip mill, the gossip mongers in AA, and people said, so-and-so said this about you, so-and-so that. And it had been years since I even entertained the thought of worrying about what somebody thought of me. And I went, So I did what our book talks about. I asked God for help. I talked to somebody about it. And I turned my thoughts towards somebody else. There wasn't anybody to make amends to. And I said, God, you're going to have to redirect my focus. I am focused on something that's making me unhappy. And I'm mad at myself because I did it. So within 2 days of making that prayer, I'm at a meeting at the East Side Center. It's a little clubhouse. And the guy who introduces me, that's been sober about 7 years, he said, when I found out I was speaker chair, first person I thought of was Joe. I thought, oh, this will be good. And he said, every time I'm around Joe and we talk, I walk away feeling better. I thought, you do? I didn't know that at all. I thought, and I got up and I said, what a nice thing to say. Really. Well, what a nice thing to say. 2 days later, I'm speaking at another clubhouse, the Solano Club down in Kentucky, and the guy gets up and he's a speaker chair, and it's the same thing. He said, I first heard Joe at the Promises Club years ago, about 6 years ago. He said, I was a toothless, crackhead alcoholic. And he said, I didn't get sober when I heard Joe. He said, but I walked out of there feeling like I had some hope. He said, well, every time I'm around Joe, I feel like I have some hope. I went, wow, I didn't know that. I had no clue that I was being useful like that. And at the end of that same meeting, there was a woman that came up to me, and she had lost a baby that was 5 months old. And she says, I was really debating on whether to go back to drinking or not. And she said, I prayed before I came to the meeting, God, please give me a sign that there's a way out. Please help me somehow, some way. And she said, you were my sign. I says, I was? She said, yeah, remember when you talked about your boys being born a year apart on the same day, on November 20th? I said, yeah. She said, my little boy was born on November 20th. Thank you. And I get chills thinking about being useful and not knowing it. I think that's the ultimate, really. To go through life having a positive effect on other people and not knowing it. I really prefer it that way, really. It makes me feel so good. I'm going to end my talk talking about humility. Humility isn't being this pious kind of brother or sister, some kind of wafer. To me, humility is not about being better than anybody else. Humility is about being better than I used to be. That's a very humbling thing for somebody like me. And I take great satisfaction in knowing that I'm better than I used to be, you see, much better. And I look around, my wife's here. We have 2 boys, they're 29 and 30. The youngest one is 29. He was born with his feet on upside down. You know, I'm sober about 6, 7 years. I'm going, where's the crippled foot chapter in here? Real cynical. And he had many operations, and he's an aerospace engineer for Gulfstream Jet in Savannah. He graduated with a degree in aerospace in German and never needed his feet. God's going, you were worried about his feet, weren't you? Hey, that's not funny, man. That's not funny. So he turned out okay, and the oldest boy, he's an electrician, and he has his own company. He works for the Electrical Workers Union. He's a working fool, and both of those boys have never seen me drunk. Both of those boys never had to. Now, they've seen me nuts. I'll tell you, I've done some bizarre things sober. I could go weeks at a time with peace of mind, and all of a sudden I'm out in the garage fine-tuning this lawnmower with a ball-peen hammer because it won't work. They're looking at him like, wasn't he just the guy that was okay for 6 weeks? I've done stuff like that. But I'd say for the most part, I'm happy being here. I'm happy being Joe. When I came here, if you would have said, what we're going to do for you is not only show you a way where you won't have to drink again, it won't rule your life, but you're going to want to be you, and you're going to want to be here. I go, oh, this is getting deeper by the minute. Yeah, I don't want to be me, and I don't want to be here. I said, we know you don't. I want to be anybody else. Well, you can't. Why? He said, everybody else is taken. you have to be you. Okay. And we're going to teach you that you want your problems in your life, that you're going to want your life more than anything else. And I didn't see any value in that. But I see value in being Joe today. I didn't know that I was useful just because I'm me. And if you're new, I know you're not going to believe this, but if you're here, you're useful just because you're you. Not because of anything that you've done, not for anybody that you've helped, just because you're you. And I am so grateful to be here, and I was so grateful that I was asked to come back. And I hope you have a good weekend, because I'm going to have a good weekend. Thank you.